Happy Wednesday and welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Win Again Academy. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today we have Jennifer Hendricks-Fogg on the Wolff Den on the show. Welcome. How's everything going?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be a great episode today, a important topic, and so we're going to get into everything. But for the people who don't know who you are, just give a real quick introduction, and we'll get to it.
So my name is Jennifer Hendricks-Fogg. I am in upstate New York, and I recently wrote a book called Tiny Miracles on my journey with my son through childhood cancer.
That is, I've started to read the book. I have it here, so it's on Amazon for anyone who's interested in taking a read at it. And it's, man, I mean, we all, you have those moments in time that you just never forget, right? I mean, there's people who talk about JFK and when he was shot in the Challenger, and there's so many other moments, but this is, I remember, because I remember when my dad died of pancreatic cancer, my mom
Yep.
has MDS. So I remember when they first told you that, and it's just such a gut punch, right? I mean, it's like
Oh, yeah. That's
you
putting it
describe it
lightly.
a little bit in the book, but how vividly do you remember that? I mean, we all remember it, but how vividly do you remember it, and how often do you sort of go through it again in your mind?
Yeah. So I remember the day he was diagnosed, like it was this morning. He was diagnosed on March 8th, 2017. The doctors told us, I remember I remember the doctor waiting for the nurse to leave the room before he closed the door to even say anything to us, which was unlike him. And he said, your son has a malignant brain tumor. And it took me a minute to comprehend, the word malignant. And I'm like, malignant, but benign. And I was like, what? I finally realized what he said. And I said, okay, so what do we do? And, without doing a biopsy and just looking at it, they thought it was like a grade 3, grade 4. And just by looking at it, they're like, we don't think there's much we can do. Um, and he immediately got admitted to NICU, and they did a biopsy, sent the biopsy out to Boston. So we're in Albany, New York, Albany Med. And they sent the biopsy to Boston, New York City, and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. So biopsy comes back. It was all over the place. They diagnosed him as a congenital glioblastoma. So initially they said it was a glioblastoma, which I had recently had a friend pass away from. And when he said congenital, I was like, what does that mean? And basically it's the worst type of tumor at the best time in his life. So when they got some feedback from the other hospitals, they said they were cautiously optimistic. And I said, okay, what do we have to do? But just hearing those words, and I don't think I mentioned it yet, but my son was 3.5 months old when that
Yeah,
happened.
that was my next comment, part of the conversation.
Yeah. So that, you never think it's going to happen to you, nonetheless, your child, nonetheless, your baby. So it was definitely a punch in the gut for sure.
Yeah, we have so many guests on here with stories. People who have cancer, people who have disease. There's never a good time to have it. I hate to compare stuff
Sure.
between diseases. But when we talk about it, I think that's something that we have to do. So 3.5 months old is, man, that's like, it's, how do
Yeah.
they not have any idea to know that as you're going through the birthing process or even at birth?
Yeah, so we were actually very lucky because I had what they call a geriatric pregnancy. I was pregnant at 39, I gave birth at 40, and they were monitoring me more so than normal because of my age. And at his last ultrasound in early November, they found fluid on his brain. So they said that they wanted to do an emergency MRI. So we did that a week later. On November 17th of 2016. I had an emergency MRI, 8 months pregnant. Not very comfortable, I might add. And they said, okay, the fluid is a brain bleed. And I said, okay. And the doctor called that night and said, so we want you to check into the hospital tomorrow morning for more testing. And I hung up the phone and I looked at my husband and I said, we're having a kid tomorrow. And he's like, no, we're not. And I go, yes, we are. I purposely asked the doctor, do you want me to pack my bag? Should I pack the baby's bag? She's like, yeah, just to be safe. I'm like, I'm having a kid tomorrow. Like, I just knew it. So got to the hospital the next morning. The first doctor that came in was one of the radiologists. And he said to us, I'm so sorry. We think your son has NAIT, N-A-I-T, which is neonatal, some platelet disorder where mom's platelets and dad platelets don't mesh, so the baby won't survive. And I looked him in the face and I had a few choice words for him. And I said, get out. Like, that's not an acceptable answer. So then the NICU doctor came in and he said, look, he's like, we don't know what it is. It could be a million things. We need to get him out to try to fix him. And I was like, all right, what do we do? So they ended up giving me steroids that day to help his heart and his lungs. And I had an emergency C-section that day. He spent 5 days in NICU. They tested him for anything and everything and came to the conclusion that it was just a birth defect, that he was born with a brain bleed. They were just going to monitor it. And that was that. So we've had his neurosurgeon, his oncologist, his neurologist. We've had all his doctors since the day he was born. We're very blessed in that regard.
Yeah.
So he was born November 18th. At the end of December, he had an MRI. Logan is my son's name, if you guys didn't catch that by now. He had an MRI and the brain bleed was dissipating. So that's exactly what they expected, that he was going to grow out of it. He started physical therapy just to make sure, and everything was good. He's like, come back in 3 months. So we went back in 3 months, and yeah, the brain bleed was gone. And this tumor, a third of the size of his head, had appeared. So they think that he was born with it, but the brain bleed was hiding it on the scan. And then the tumor grew off the brain bleed.
Yeah, my father had Parkinson's and then got pancreatic, and we believe that the Parkinson's was kind of masking the pancreatic. You sort of don't know what you're looking for,
right?
And you sort of think everything's okay.
Yep.
And pancreatic, it wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter if you find out. There's nothing you can do about it. But for you guys, fortunate enough that you were able to do some stuff. But I have friends who lost their babies very soon after birth. It's it's a terrible. I can't. I don't have
imagine.
kids. I have nieces and nephews. It's unimaginable because the joy that you have when you have a child, and even for you, it's like you had all this worries, and then you have the child. And you feel like everything's going to be okay, and it's only 3 months later that you're told it's not.
Yeah,
it's such a roller coaster.
Extremely.
Yeah, and now you're sort of used to the roller coaster, right? Because that's what life is with someone like Logan. You mentioned something early in the book about stuff about how it's supposed to be. Tell us a little bit about your feeling like that, because I don't think that everything happens how it's meant to be, but I do believe that there's luck, or whatever you want to call it, with Logan having parents such that he has, because not everyone can handle that, and that doesn't make you necessarily a bad person, but not everybody can handle something like that.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I unfortunately, I do believe that everything happens for a reason, and that he chose us to be his parents for a reason, because he knew, that we could get him through it. And, the irony of our situation is I'm an independent benefits consultant with Aflac. So I sell cancer insurance for a living. I had the cancer plan on my son when he was diagnosed.
Wow.
And unbeknownst to me, I never put two and two together until after the fact, but Children's Healthcare of Atlanta that wrote my son's treatment plan, AFLAC sponsors their Blood Disorders and Cancer Center. So the whole synchronicity with the situation is huge. And going back to your point that no, not everybody can handle it. In the beginning, I was like, anybody would do this. But as we progressed through his treatment, I saw other kids. And there's another child I think of all the time. He's only a month older than my son, a different type of brain tumor, but his family was never there. He was always in NICU by himself. The nurses would walk him around and console him. And it broke my heart. Like, how could you have a child? And then, unfortunately their, personal circumstances didn't allow for it. It was a young mom. She had two older girls, not a good situation. But to your point, like, that's why I feel like, Logan chose us because, I waited till I was 40 to have my first kid. And I was so passionate about it that the several times they told me he wasn't going to survive, I was like, that's not an option. Like, I didn't wait till I was 40 to have my first child for God to take him away. Like, no, that's not in the cards. What do we have to do? And even his doctors to this day tell us that, more than half the reason that our son survived was because of the passion between me and my husband, because of the faith. And as a matter of fact, he just had a follow-up visit last week with his oncologist and the neurologist. And the oncologist pulled me aside and she goes, your son's a miracle, right? And I was like, I know. He's supposed to be here. He's supposed to prove you wrong. And the doctors love that he proved them wrong. Like, they tell me all the time, remember that time I told you he'd never walk? What the hell was I thinking? And I just, he's got a brain injury now from where the tumor was. So he's very difficult. He doesn't talk, in sentences. He can't really communicate. He does a little bit of sign. He says some words. He tries, and he's 100% tube fed, meaning he's got a tube in his belly that we feed him formula and smoothies, because he has an oral aversion. So anytime you would put something near his mouth, he just, he fights us. He takes water and stuff, but I mean, in his defense, he puked the first 2 years of his life from chemo. Would you want anything near your mouth?
Yeah.
So it's still a struggle. It's still a daily, fight. And we still have, PTSD and those anxieties, but he is a miracle. And, I wrote the book to share with people that, yeah, shit happens. Life sucks sometimes, but it's not what happens to you. It's how you deal with it. And I think that's just hugely important.
Yeah. He's 5 now, right? 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just celebrated his birthday, right? You said March.
November. So he's 5.5.
Oh, 5.5 was November.
Yeah.
Is March an important date? Was there something?
March 8th was the diagnosis day. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. So almost 6, saw the pictures. There's a QR code there that you could follow online and see some pictures. Real cute kid. Long blonde hair.
Yep.
This is a weird. Does anyone ever mistake Logan for a
all the
little
time?
Girl?
All the time. All the time. And my rebuttal is, he's a cancer survivor. What'd you do before you were 2?
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
No,
but it's his trophy.
Yeah.
He didn't have hair for the first 2 years of his life, and I just can't. I can't bring myself to cut it yet. Like, it's his trophy for beating cancer. When he wants to cut it, I'll cut it. If he tells me, Mom, cut my hair, but it's his signature now.
He's a really cute kid. And I know, we talk about, because I have other friends who have cancer and beat cancer, and they run the gamut from 30 to 40, and these are diseases that you can't tell. You have no idea. And if I look at him, just looking at him, I have no idea. And so that's it's hard to walk around with no one knowing what you're going through, except, the people who are around you.
Yeah. Yeah. You would never know by looking at him what he's been through. He was diagnosed with autism last summer, and that was another punch in the gut. I basically said to the doctor, just one more effing thing, like anything else you want to give my kid. And because I said to her, I said, how do you know it's not his brain injury? And she's like, we don't. She goes, but if at least I give him that diagnosis, it'll allow him to get more services. And I was like, fine. I was like,
Yeah.
give him whatever you want then. So, not that there's anything wrong with autism by any means, but for us, it's just like, again, one more effing thing. Like, why do one more thing we have to deal with? Like, didn't my kid having cancer and, having hearing loss and hearing aids and not being able to talk and have a feeding tube, isn't that enough?
Yeah.
So it's hard. He's a two-man job. Like when we go places, it's my husband and I or I borrow my nephew. I'm like, what are you doing? Because he's a runner. And it's so funny because they told us he'd probably never walk. And I'm like, he doesn't, he runs. Which is great.
Does insurance doesn't offer help, aids, none of that?
So we do get funding for assistance, but I use that for when I'm at work, right? Yeah. So, and to be honest, we did have a nanny for a couple of years. That was a whole situation in itself. You can read in the book. Yeah. But then we had another one last year for a few months. And then when she left, I said, it's just too difficult. And the reason being is because consistency is huge with Logan. And once you break that, like, it affects him. And, obviously our job as parents is to protect our kids as much as we can. So yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it's hard. So we just kind of suck it up.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's a catch-22 because we want him to experience these things, but it's so hard and so difficult for us because we never know how he's going to act. Like, I took him to a fair a couple of weeks ago and I had my nephew with me and he was just running circles. He's just doing what Logan does, just run circles. It's absolutely hysterical. And all I wanted to do was just go up and down the aisles. I knew I wasn't going to be able to stop and do any shopping. Like, I just wanted to walk up and down and see what was there. He flipped out, complete meltdown, broke down, sat in the middle of that one aisle. And I was just like, okay. And we just sat there for a few minutes. And it took everything in me not to have a breakdown myself, right? Because it's like, I don't have a lot of help. I don't, I still want to do normal things, but it's hard. Yeah, it's tough. It's really hard.
But you have to be able to break down yourself and have your self-care, and same with your husband. So there's got to be, relief for you in some sense, even if that is just, I have a breakdown. I cry. I have these moments where it's going to be, I was actually going to talk about this, but you just mentioned the word normal.
Yeah.
It's an interesting word. I mean, I don't aim to be normal, but I have the ability to be whatever you want, extraordinary or different or quirky. But someone like Logan probably would love to be normal, right? So what's the prospects for Logan's life in getting some sense of normalcy? Like, what can improve? What might the future look like?
So, going through everything we've been through and obviously being his mother, I think he's going to be fine. He's overcome every worst case scenario that was thrown at us. They told us several times he wasn't going to survive. Then after the brain surgeries, they told us he would probably be paralyzed or never be able to walk. Well, again, he doesn't walk, he runs. Then, he does have slight hearing loss from the chemo, which is actually gotten a little better. So even his neurosurgeon, I asked, is that permanent? He's like, I don't know.
Who knows?
He's overcome everything else. I don't know. Because where the tumor was his left frontal lobe. So his brain, where if it were you and I, we'd be vegetables. But as a baby, as a child, their neuroreceptors in their brain just reattach because their brain is so malleable that way. So he just has to relearn. His brain is just rewiring. Then they told us, the developmental pediatrician told me, I want to say 3 years ago now, I think right when COVID hit, because it was a virtual visit, she had told us, he'd probably never talk. And then after that visit, she's like, forget I said that. She's like, I just heard 20 words. He can put like 4 words together. He's obsessed with balls. So I want yellow ball. Or the only thing he does eat is veggie straws. It's the weirdest thing.
They're pretty good.
He'll say, I want blue chips. So he can communicate certain needs like that. So he's getting there, and he understands way more than I think we think he does at times.
Yeah.
But that's what most kids
And
do,
he's still
right?
a 5-year-old. So it's like,
Yeah.
even when you're with a 3-year-old and a 5, like, who knows? It's almost like having a pet. You have no idea what they want, right? I mean, you're just guessing half the time.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, because he's actually really good. Like, so when he comes home from school, or when we get home from the day, he takes his sneakers off and his socks off. He puts his sneakers back where they belong. He puts his socks in the hamper, and he goes to sit down. And like, my friends that have like 13-year-olds that are normal with no issues are like, my kid doesn't even do that.
Yeah.
So, we are lucky in that regard. He really is a good kid, and he's super smart. It's just hard.
Yeah. This is a difficult question. Is surviving an issue still?
So no, and that's okay. That's okay. No. So when he finished treatment, he actually finished treatment 2 rounds earlier than expected. When he was diagnosed, so his diagnosis of a congenital glioblastoma, he's like number 88, like, ever diagnosed with this type of tumor. And they have special tumor boards, especially for, unique cases. So he got 5 rounds of aggressive inpatient chemo, and he was supposed to get 8 rounds of outpatient chemo. And they actually ended at 6 rounds because they felt that they overtreated it. And I asked the same question to my doctor, what's the risk of this reoccurring? And she's confident that it's not going to come back again, being that it was congenital. She said, but if it does, again, the whole serendipity here, her brother-in-law or her brother works for one of the pharmaceutical companies that just created a drug. I'm getting the chills right now saying this. Just created a drug that attacks that specific genetic marker that Logan had. So she said, if it does come back, she's like, I don't think it's gonna. She's like, but if it does, there's a drug developed that'll attack it.
So this is another thing about the world, and timing is everything, right? So if someone is born with that today, you're saying there's a drug that can almost fight it.
Well, I don't know if it would work for babies at that point, because again, think about it, the way, and this is the horrible, only 4% of federal funding goes to childhood cancer research. So there haven't been new drugs created for children, and I can, don't quote me on this, but in over 20 years. So the drugs that my son received were developed for adults. So I believe that this drug that she's talking about is for adults, which is why if it came back, he's older than a baby that he would be able to take. But yeah, unfortunately, the chemos that these kids get, any kid gets, there haven't been new developments in over 20 years for kids.
And still on timing, if you would have had a baby 5 years, 10 years earlier, that they think that would have made a difference? Or is it just
personally? So I Googled, never do this, never Google diagnosis. I Googled his diagnosis once, and I'll never do it again. And the case study that I found was from 1983, I think. And it was not a good outcome.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'm not looking at this again.
Yeah. But medicine has advanced so much from 83, and now even from, the time when he was born. We talk about 4% is such a small number. Why is that? Is it because experimenting on children is not viewed as the same as experimenting on older people? I mean,
I don't know how they do the research. I'm a huge advocate for that federal funding, because in my, obviously not just because of Logan, but in my mind, it's like, if we can save our kids, right, then in the future they can turn around and save us. So, it's like, fixing your flat tire with that goo right before it goes completely flat because you want to keep it going. Like I just don't, that's a horrible analogy, but I tried. But that's my point. Like you just, I don't know. I just feel like if we did more for our kids, then they could do more for us.
It's so, I'm careful where I give my money because I want to really know where it's
Right.
going, what it's doing. And in some ways, no one ever knows where it's going.
Yep.
Someone says we give, 90 cents out of every dollar. Who knows really? But the problem is, and we've had a lot of people with charities and done stuff for the LLS, leukemia. My mom has MDS, and we did fundraising. I champion for mental health. There's just in my family alone, we have all these causes that have affected us. It's hard to get the time, the platform, the money for all of this. And there's so many different cancer, even child cancer and all these.
Right.
So it's like they're all kind of doing separate things, even the drug companies themselves. It feels like it might be better served to have a monopoly in those areas where it's just one organization who's working on this. Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, the biggest organization that focuses on it is St. Baldrick's Foundation. So that is huge. Like even the American Cancer Society does, but they pool their money, all to different cancers. Although I did find out if you do write a check to American Cancer Society and you put on the memo where you want the money to go, that's where they have to disperse it.
Yeah.
But St. Baldrick's Foundation, hands down, is the number one foundation that focuses on childhood cancer research.
And you have Logan Strong Foundation, which helps. I think the smaller ones are, as you start to get to bigger companies, yes, they're 501c3 and they're nonprofit and they're charity, but they're an organization and they're also a business. I mean, they are a business. And so they make choices related to that.
Right.
So, I would encourage to find the organizations like, Logan Strong. In the back of your book, you have a lot of good resources and places that you can go read about and maybe put some money towards, or your time. Time is also stuff that people need as well.
Yeah. So we started the Logan Strong Foundation because we found, we had a very extreme case. Like we lived in the hospital for 6 months. So we were home maybe 2 weeks for that entire time frame. So, there's a lot of great local organizations in different areas around the US. And we just found there were certain things that, we would have wanted more of. So we give gift cards to families for groceries or gas, right? We do no touching signs. It says no touching, your germs are too big for me, because obviously Logan was a baby. Everybody wants to touch a baby, but it's like he's immunocompromised because he's on chemo. So stay away. Mm-hmm. And then we've got these little crocheted octopus. Somebody made one for him and he just fell in love with it. They're actually meant for NICU babies because the tentacles, like the umbilical cord, actually, I have a mini one right here. I keep one at my desk because it calms me. But we give these to all of our kids. We also do Amazon wish list. My lighting is horrible.
No, it's good. You can see it.
Going in and out. We do Amazon wish lists for the families, so the kids can just go on there and do whatever they want, whatever they need. Like we just had a parent, buy baseball stuff for her other child because, you have multiple kids. You want to make sure you're supporting them all. We also do online fundraising campaigns for the families, so they can pick t-shirts, baseball hats, whatever. They design their own logo. So part of the mission of the foundation is to not only provide items of comfort and support, but also help raise childhood cancer awareness, right? Because we all hear about these other cancers, but childhood cancer doesn't get enough marketing, I guess, alongside that. So then we also do bracelet campaigns for families also, so they can use these items as fundraisers also. Yeah. So, we were lucky. We were very lucky in the regard that, Logan was put on Medicaid the day he was diagnosed. So we never saw a medical bill, knock on wood. But some, and I didn't have to work. So, not every family has that ability. So we want to empower our families to raise money, to raise awareness, and, to keep their kids comfortable.
Do you still do the golf? You had a golf tournament and a
Yep.
10K run or
Yep. So
running
we
for
do,
10K?
yeah, we do a walk. So we do a walk in May, which is Brain Cancer Awareness Month, and then we do a golf tournament in September, which is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month.
And the walk was for those who can't walk.
Yep. Walk for those who can't. Yep. So again, kids that, like Logan, were told never would walk because of where his tumor was, or, they're immunocompromised and they can't leave their room, or their body hurts too much from the chemo and they can't walk, or they're, unfortunately, some kids get limbs amputated because of where their cancer is.
Yeah, you had again. I read a little. I haven't read the whole book, but what I did read, been enjoying some powerful quotes and information. You make a comment about time, having enough time to, I guess, to write the book, and I agree with you. There's time for everything.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of where do you prioritize and how do you want. And you said something about it. Everything else is just an excuse. And
Yeah.
look, there's some excuses that are legitimate, but at the end of the day, we have enough time to do really almost everything that we need to if we can
Right.
find a way to manage that time, which most people are terrible at time management.
Yep. I agree.
And
And it's not so much, and I think there's a, old adage, like, it's not about managing time, it's about managing what you do in that time. Because you can't manage, the clock is going to tick away anyway, so it's just how you focus in that time frame. And I was very lucky. I had an amazing editor that, she gave me a timeline and she worked with me, and I'm one of those people that work better under pressure anyway. So, I would wait until the last minute. And then chapter 4 in the book is actually Logan's diagnosis day. And that was the last chapter I wrote.
Yeah,
I had a very hard time writing that chapter.
This is my brother who has been doing great things for oncology, worked for Lilly, and he's just really
wonderful.
good, a champion for all types of cancer. And yeah, time is not the end. We all have the same 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
It's how do we choose to do it. But part of the key is not running yourself ragged physically and mentally too, because we all have responsibilities. I'm a husband. I have a company to run. You're a mother and a wife. And so if we are doing too much, then we're no good to ourselves or to some of the other people. So there's you got to find that line, even as an employee, work. But at some point there's diminishing returns. And so you have to it's hard. That's a hard balance to take. I don't 100%. Argue with my body anymore. If my body tells me to take a nap, I take a nap.
I agree. 100%. And it's funny you say that. That's a good segue into, the key takeaway of the book is resilience. And it's, not what happens to you, but it's how you deal with it. So I, going off that point, I have a 3-step process to resilience. So the first step is, right, you just got to survive, right? You just got to listen to your body. If you got to take a break, take a break. If you got to cry, cry. If you need to go for a walk, go for a walk. So just deal with it, right? And the second step is recover. Okay, I've soaked it in. Like, what's my next step? Like, what do I need to do to help me get through this? And then the third step is to survive, because again, you were given this life for a reason. Like, you have to do something with it. Don't just sit there and watch it go by. Like, that's why I wanted to share our story, because the doctors told us several times he would never survive. And I'm sure you've read some parts of my book. It's some colorful language. And I had a lot of choice words for them. I'm like, this isn't an option. Like, what do we do? So yeah, there were days where I cried. Yeah, there were days that, I didn't want to get out of bed. But I did. And you got to push through sometimes and just do it. And that goes with anything in life.
Yeah, yesterday was the last day of Mental Health Awareness Month, and I had a memory on Facebook that I reshared with the picture. You've survived 100% of your bad days. You're doing great. Yeah, it's great. I mean, we figure the the best is yet to come, and possibly the worst is yet to
Yeah.
come. Brace yourself for both of them and be prepared, and know that it's kind of like I don't know. I have this feeling, and you mentioned it, like just that everything's going to be okay. I don't know how everything's going to be okay. I'm going to do
Right.
whatever I can to make
Right.
everything okay. I don't think it's a faith or a God. I just have that
It's a
feeling. And
belief.
I think not having that feeling is you're doing a disservice to yourself,
I was just going to say you're
because
hurting
we're
yourself.
worrying about stuff that we can't control anyway.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. 100%.
You're are you at? Is it going to get easier for you? Is it going to? I know there's going to be roller coasters, but is the trend going to be that it's going easy? He's going to get easier for you as
I
Logan gets
hope
older.
so. I hope so. I don't know.
I mean, you don't have
There's
long
I
thoughts.
don't have a crystal ball. I mean, I guess I can answer that. I don't know if it's going to get easier, but it'll be easier to handle because we're
Yeah,
used to it,
right.
right? Um Unfortunately. But I mean, I joke with some of my friends, and I think I wrote it in the book. I don't know how people have kids that actually talk back to them. Like, I couldn't handle that. My son does have an attitude and he has his way sometimes, but like, he just sits and he chills and he's such a good kid. And I don't know, it's a blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah. I want to talk about your husband for a minute. You
Yeah.
obviously wrote a book. We're talking to you today. Is he someone who's kind of behind the scenes? Does he do a lot of? And there's nothing wrong with it. Believe me, not everyone wants to be, put stuff out there and be the face of it.
Yeah.
But what's his role with everything?
He's extremely supportive. He's the reason, our marriage helped get through everything. Like, we're so opposite in certain, look at me, I'm still playing with this thing. We're so opposite in certain regards, but we're also a lot alike. But it was good through Logan's treatment, because if I was having a bad day and I was, down on the situation, he would build me up, and like vice versa. So we always had that balance. Um, he's not a very public person. He doesn't even have a Facebook, and I'm
Yeah,
okay with that. Um, but he doesn't. We just have a good balance, and our son has that personality of us. So, I'm a very open, in your face kind of person, and my husband's chill and laid back, and that's
yeah,
just Logan. Like, he's got a
good mix.
perfect blend. Like, he'll tell you, he has no problem telling you when he's pissed off or something's wrong. But most of the time he's just laid back and chill like his dad, and it just works. And he's 100% supportive of all my decisions, and we talk about them, for sure. But no, he's awesome.
It's important because you see a lot of families can get broken up by
Hmm.
a mother losing a child before birth, and losing a baby after his birth,
Yeah.
a child who has a disease that you just can't. Again, we talked about it earlier. Just some people weren't cut out to be a parent to a special needs child. It's not. It doesn't make you a bad person. I might. I think. I thought about that myself. Like, what would I do if? And I'd love to think that I can just be, this superhero
Right.
person to do it, but I don't know. I feel that way when I see with my family when they get sick and trying to be a caretaker. It's tough for me to be around. When I visited my grandma in the hospital, my father, and even when I take my mom, like I'm not that type of
Yeah.
person that can be around others who are suffering, because it makes me very upset.
My husband's
Yeah,
very similar. My
yeah,
husband's very similar. I had a lot of guilt for a long time because, my husband and I met late in life. We married late in life, and he was the guy that was never going to get married and never wanted kids. So, here we are, and I always wanted kids, and we have a kid, and I'm like, oh, I gave you a kid with cancer. So I had a lot of guilt for a long time. And, he obviously was very reassuring. Um, but it was very hard because, especially as a mom, like, we still have our issues every once in a while. Like, I have a very flexible career. He doesn't. So, 90% of Logan's life and therapies and driving, is me. But I've built my career to that point where I have the flexibility to do so. He helps when he can. He drives Logan to school every day, and I pick Logan up every day because I have that availability. But there's times where I'm like, I get overwhelmed, go back to that whole, survival mode, like, okay, I need a break. And he listens and understands, and he tries to help as much as he can, but it works. It just works. Plus, if he handled some of that stuff, I'm such a control freak. I don't know if I would let him.
I know that feeling. Is there any hope for Logan to be independent someday?
I hope so. I really do. I don't know. Because he he used to do a lot of head banging out of frustration. He has stopped that because he actually had a one-on-one aide in preschool for 2 years just for that.
Do you put a helmet on at that point?
So they wanted to, but we shied against it because he had a helmet on prior to that to reshape his head. Because the back of his head was flat because he laid flat in a hospital bed for a year and a half getting treatment. So, the baby's head is so soft, it flattened. So he had a helmet to reshape his head. So we didn't want to do another helmet, which luckily he grew out of it. But it was more so because he can't communicate. He was just bang his head, or, maybe he had a headache because all the brain receptors were reconnecting. I don't know. He can't tell us. I think I would like to think he would. I really would. I would love that for my child.
Yeah, it'd be great for you guys as well. There's something about seeing your child accomplish all these things that if they're independent, they can do more than if they have to be dependent, which I know people who have children who are never going to be independent, and they live a very good and happy and fulfilling life.
Yeah.
One of our great supporter of the show and my concert buddy Corey, I don't know if he's listening or watching, but man, he is one of the happiest people I know on earth, and the hand that he was dealt, you wouldn't wish it on anybody. And so it's always a perspective, right? You see all I always look at Down syndrome kids as like, they're the happiest people on the planet. Poster child for being so happy, and they don't, because they don't know. In some respects, they don't know better.
I agree. I'm a huge supporter of perspective.
And so many things that people can do that's not like, for you and I, they're not great goals, but for these other people, it's like, all right, that's the best. That's the best that we think we can do. And that might even be the case for people who don't have any disease. Like there's just there's just certain things that you're
true.
I don't want to say destined to do, but you can and you can't do.
Yep. I agree.
And you can live a really fulfilling life.
Yeah, it's definitely all about perspective. And that's, again, part of the reason I think Logan's done so well is because we don't hold him back. We let him be him. Like we only ever fired one of his therapists, and that was just because she was too easy on him.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, you don't, just because he looks like he has special needs, don't treat him that way. Like you need to do better. And she was just, and I only ever stopped therapy once, and I would let him push him until he cried, but he wasn't feeling good one day. So I stopped. But other than that, like, it's just, going back to that normal conversation, right? Like you just got to be there and treat it like normal.
We had a coaching conversation yesterday. Coach Scott Fox was on the Wolff Den, and one of the things I said is you have to coach in different ways. You don't coach everyone the same people. So that's the same with therapy. Some people need tough love. Some people need a little bit more compassion, and you need to you don't respond well. You do have to push because it's an uphill battle. Right? There's obstacles that need to be overcome, but you also have to read the room and the patient and and try. It's
Mm-hmm.
not easy to do, especially when you're dealing with illness and
Mm-hmm.
disease. It's hard to watch sometimes, right? Even if it's not your own, which imagine if it is your own, it's a lot harder
Right.
to have to do stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a really it's heroes. I think are the people who help people like that, and there's a lot of good ones out there. And you can get some bad doctors. We have bad doctors, bad therapists, I mean, bad lawyers,
Agreed.
bad
Yeah.
whatever. There's good and bad for everything. So it's
Yep.
sort of the luck of the draw. The doctor said some stuff to you. I had some experience with that with my grandma, who was told by the doctors that my grandpa would never walk out of the hospital, and he lived like 3 years later. And my mom, I don't know if they said she wouldn't survive, but she's living well past the
That's great.
time that she probably should with what she's going
Mm-hmm.
on. What's your feeling on a good doctor versus good bedside manner if you had to choose one?
Ooh. Um, that's a great question. I don't know if I could choose one. I mean, I would probably say bedside manner only because
Interesting.
that doctor has a team of doctors they work with. So even though they're not the best, they have access to it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Because
Yeah,
I
I'm
just
I'm
look
a good
back.
doctor kind of guy. Customer service, look, tell me what I need. I get there's ways. The,
I
the
mean, I
issue
guess it's
for that
different
is,
the situation, you know.
yeah, these doctors it's hard for them. I don't envy someone having to say something like that to you, because the alternative is not saying something to you and that
Right.
actually happening. Imagine that.
Right.
You got to imagine that, and it's not an easy thing. So I'd rather err on the side of caution in a way, but also there's again that emotional roller coaster, like going through stuff that you don't necessarily have to.
Yeah, we were really lucky. You know, Logan's first oncologist, she is an amazing doctor, but she also wears her emotions on her face. So you could always tell what was going on because you could read it in her face. Um, and we were also lucky because she was a young mom. You know, she had a new baby at the time too, and she always treated Logan as if he were her own. So, we were lucky in that regard. But I say bedside manner because I look back to the first radiologist that told us our son wouldn't survive, and the way he delivered it was just like, who the hell do you like? How do you have it? Like, how do you talk to somebody like that?
Yeah,
Like, I understand. And that's the thing, you going back to your grandfather and your mom, like, they have to tell you the worst case scenario. They have to. It's, medicine. Um, but it's also not perfect and things change. And going back to beliefs and strength and resilience, like, you can will things either way. Like, if the doctor tells you you have 5 months to live, you're like, oh, I have 5 months to live, my life sucks. Or you could say, I have 5 months to live, I'm going to live it up, and oh, by the way, 5 years later you're still here.
yeah. I mean, the only thing you have
you
to
know
worry about is money, right? Is like I say that, right? If you have
Right.
5 months and you waste it all in 5 months, and now, oh great, I'm
Right.
living for five
Right.
years.
Right.
That's most of it. It's a Tim McGraw, "Live Like You Were Dying."
Right.
Played that song,
Yeah.
one of my favorite songs. The With regards to who was the most helpful, take away your husband, take away the medical community. Who was the most helpful with what happened and is going on with Logan?
Oh gosh.
Is there
Outside of like
someone that
family and
stands out?
stuff.
No, I guess maybe family. Is there someone that stands out?
Um, my mother-in-law.
Yeah, it takes a village, obviously, but
We my in-laws had just and my mother-in-law's name is Karen, and she is the epitome of a Karen, and we joke about it all the time. So I can say that. But my in-laws had just moved to North Carolina a few months prior to Logan's birth. And when he was diagnosed, they came right up and they basically stayed in New York for, a good 6 to 8 months. And I would stay in the hospital during the week with Logan, and my mother-in-law would stay there on weekends. So my husband and I could have time and I could have a break. So my mother-in-law, she solid, solid, hands down.
Was she working at the time?
Nope, they're both retired. We were very lucky.
It's really amazing too, because how many people are retired, but then they don't have time to help. It's amazing how I hear that all the time, or they, excuses as you say it, like
Yeah,
maybe miss that one card game because it's
right.
something that's bigger than you know people
Yeah.
need help. We need so much help in our lives to get everything, and we take a lot of stuff for granted. I ask for a lot of help, I give a lot of help, so I feel
Hmm.
confident in that. But I always say, like, you don't realize how much help you have gotten until it's not there,
Yeah.
and hopefully you don't ever have to experience that,
Yep.
because
Yeah.
it's like we're real, it's talking about the privilege of just having a support system that
Yep.
we talked about that earlier. You said that I've been to the hospitals many times to visit my grandma every day and my mom, and you see people with no one, and you're just like, how
It's
does that
sad.
happen? How does that
It's
happen?
really sad.
Maybe they did it to themselves. Who knows? It is possible. People, but there's probably a lot of people who didn't, and it's sad that friends and family, something happens and people don't want to be around you anymore. Or they find other things to do.
I think some people, in their defense, don't know how to handle it.
Yeah, it's
They
a
just don't. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to react. Like I remember, I don't really talk to my niece anymore because of how she reacted when Logan was diagnosed. She literally came to the hospital and was bawling her eyes out, and I was like, "Oh no, like this is my child. I've already done my crying. Like I appreciate you having those feelings, but I need you to be strong for me." you
yeah.
know um and some people just don't know how to handle it.
There's no yeah. We don't get trained for how to handle
Right.
divorce, disease, all of that stuff, and we
Anything.
don't know what to say. I think just being there for someone, and
Hmm.
sometimes just knowing that others are there for you without them ever doing anything is really gives me a
Hmm.
lot of comfort
Yeah.
in the struggles
Hey,
that
just
I've had.
thinking about you.
Yeah,
Just shoot a quick text. And that's something I wrote about in my book too. Because after, now that Logan's okay, people just don't check in anymore.
yeah.
And it's like just a simple, hey, how you doing? Or hey, thinking about you, or hi, just something goes a long way
I have.
in
I mean,
any circumstance.
it's a long road, but when you say that, it reminds me of my friend who lost her child this year, baby. Like, boy, I don't even remember how, it was less than a month. And
Ugh,
people right away are like, they come to you, but 3 months later,
they're all
it's like,
gone.
hey, I'm still hurting here.
Hmm.
Like maybe a nice check-in once in a while would be good. And we're all guilty of being busy, but there's people in my life who are always there, and I try and do it. My sister's the best example of that. Today's actually her birthday, so we're going to give a shout out to my sister, celebrating her birthday. She's in France, but she's the best one at
Okay.
that, at just making sure that people know. I don't know, just being thoughtful. That's just it,
Hmm.
just thoughtful. Not everyone is thoughtful, and
Yeah.
my sister inspires me to be thoughtful. So it's something that we can all do that costs nothing. Check in on someone, whether it's a mental health thing or just
Yep.
check in on someone because they had something going on, and just because they don't talk about it or doesn't mean that it's over, that they're still not dealing with stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah, I have a girlfriend like that. She actually just texted me this morning. Have a fabulous day.
Yeah,
Thanks. Love you too. Just when you're thinking about somebody, it's just, they popped in your head for a reason. Just shoot them a quick text.
yeah. I think, like, for me, a lot the people in my life, they know how I feel about them, so I'm not always as verbal, but it is nice to
Sure.
hear. But you should get to that point where you do know where you stand with people, and so having
Hmm.
that conversation and or going through differences and settling some things, it's very I think it's healthy for everyone. um,
Agreed.
We talked about Logan. He likes to run in a circle, and he likes yellow balls and blue chips. What else makes him happy?
Um, NASCAR.
Really?
So it's so funny. My husband races motorcycles and plays hockey. So if
Okay.
there's hockey or NASCAR on the TV, Logan is literally standing up in front of the television. Do not distract him. But it's funny. We got Logan his own iPad so he could, watch his own like YouTube kids videos, like all the kids music and stuff.
Yeah.
So he did that for the longest time. The kid can work the iPad better than me. But now he uses his iPad. I have to put on a NASCAR race.
Okay.
So he just loves that. Anything that goes fast. If we're out front and somebody's jogging by, he thinks it's absolutely hysterical. And he loves music. Loves music. He actually gets music therapy. It's actually very good
Music
for
therapy is great.
anybody
What
with
is
a
he
brain
like?
injury. They do a lot of the kids songs. So he loves the Itsy Bitsy Spider right now.
Okay.
So he says, "Wash the spider out," like he's so emphatic.
Does he
And
know
then
it's
his
raining
teacher.
tacos?
No, I didn't even know that one. I'll have to look that one up. And
Don't.
his teacher actually.
It's like the Baby Shark song.
Oh,
It'll
geez.
yeah. You
Maybe I
don't
won't
want.
then.
I don't know if you want that.
But his teacher texted me the other day. This is hysterical. I actually went to high school with his teacher. So it's really nice because she's got to see him from birth until now. So she's seen all his progress and she knows how much further he can go. And he's going to have her for the next 4 years. But she sent me a text the other day. She's like, "Your son," with a bunch of laughy emojis. And I was like, "What?" She's like, "He just hummed a song that he never heard in class today." And I was like, "Dare I ask what song my child is humming that he never learned in school?"
It was WAP by Nicki Minaj.
No,
I'm just
close.
kidding.
Now we're gonna date ourselves. Ready? Hit me, baby. One. Oh no, I'm sorry. Oops, I did it again.
I sing "Hit Me, Baby" karaoke.
Oops, I did it again. So I must have been listening to the 90s station.
Yeah, probably.
And I was like, "You've got to be kidding me." She said he hummed it perfectly.
Music is such great therapy for those
Huge.
with or without. Just for me, it's great therapy for me. I love
100%.
loud music. What makes him upset? What does he understand the struggles that he can't do? Like what makes him upset?
If he's playing and we tell him to stop, he'll get
No,
upset.
that's every kid, right?
Typical kid, right? Not a lot. Some certain noises or new experiences sometimes are very overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's I think it's called sensory deprivation or
Yeah.
something like that, where it's like your eyes can't communicate with your brain fast enough to realize what's going on, so it kind of scares them.
What's if you could have one limitation that can be taken away that you hope he overcomes, and what's the one that you most hope?
I can't pick one. I got two.
All right, give me two.
The talking and eating.
Okay.
Those are his two biggest goals.
Those are big pleasures in life and the stuff we do the most.
So if I were to choose one, I would say, if I had to choose one, I'd say eating, because the language is coming.
Yeah.
Like the language is coming. There's other
and the eating
opportunities.
will give him pleasure. There's a lot of pleasure to be had in eating.
Yes.
Yeah. The book is called Tiny Miracles. It's available on Amazon. Check out loganstrong.org for a lot more information. The book has a ton in the back. There's like 4 or 5 pages of all these other resources. Katie Hawk Foundation, Starlight Children's. There's a ton of Maddie's Mark. You mentioned a ton of great resources and how people can help. It's a great story. And it's a story that we hope no one ever has to deal with, right? I mean, these are but it's going to happen. If it's not this, it's something else, and people can relate to the struggles, and maybe it'll help them deal with what they're dealing with better. That's the hope.
Exactly.
Just get louder, get more people to read it, get more people to understand it. And, we look forward to seeing Logan grow up and following his journey. I think it's it's great. It just gives pleasure to people who know him, right? Who know him
Mhm.
or know about him, and then to see all the great strides that he makes.
Yes.
It's a strange thing that you feel for someone you've never met, but when you hear the story, you're just rooting. You can't help but root for someone like Logan,
Well,
and we're
plus
going to
he's
be
cute.
there.
Come on.
Yeah. And look, I was a cute baby, and then I had some awkward stages, and then I thought I got okay. It comes and goes, so we can't take that for granted. I want to let you out of the Wolf Den with the same question we let everybody go. If you had one person, and I'll give you two, one for you and one for Logan. If you each had to pick one person that you could spend a full day with, it could be anyone in the world. They have to be alive, and you can't be related to them. Who would you pick, and who do you think he would want to spend the day with?
um, Anybody?
Anyone.
So for me, I would. This is. Don't laugh. I would pick Pink.
Oh, that's great. Love Pink.
I just think she is a total
He
badass,
is.
down to earth. I just think I would just have so much fun with her, and
Yeah, what would you guys do? Pink is great. I don't think she's ever been mentioned, but that's a great choice.
I don't know. I would probably want her to teach me her gymnastics skills. She is
She's good.
ridiculous.
Yeah, we've seen her.
Um, she's just a badass, and I feel like I could be friends with someone like her. Um, and
And
for
Logan?
Logan, selfishly, I would say Hugh Jackman. I know that's
Yeah.
so silly. A friend of mine from high school knows Hugh Jackman and sent us a Wolverine poster and a
Oh,
Logan
wow.
poster when Logan was in treatment. And he actually sent us a signed autograph.
Oh,
So I
that's
just think that
awesome.
would be really cool.
That would
But
be
for
cool.
him, he would probably pick like a NASCAR driver.
Yeah.
Like,
Does he have a favorite he doesn't know, or
no,
numbers?
no,
Number resonate with him? Anything?
no.
Nothing.
I don't know. The rainbow car. I don't know. He likes
Yeah.
saying
That
rainbow
used to
now
be
too.
Jeff
So
Gordon, right? I think it was
I
Jeff
think
Gordon used to
so.
drive the
I think
rainbow car.
so.
Well, it's on the list. We hope to get big enough to where we can make everyone's dreams come true. Make a wish is sort of like a make a wish just for people who um,
Yep.
for whatever reason.
Yep.
Really appreciate the time. Again, check out the book
Thank you.
Tiny Miracles, and we'll have you on. We'll love to see the progression of Logan, and happy to help how we can.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. I appreciate it.
All right, have a great day, everyone. We got another episode tomorrow, so